Welcome, Moonshine theologians. This is Round the Word in Many Glasses. Today we will be drinking St. Augustine City Gate Apple Pie Moonshine, and we'll be talking about the book of Joshua. So sit back, relax, pour yourself a drink, and let's get into it. So my last video was a Stranahan's straight whiskey out of Colorado, which was a gift from my brother. This is City Gate St. Augustine, out of St. Augustine, Florida, Apple Pie Moonshine. This was a gift from my parents. And typically I don't go for really apple pie. The flavored moonshines are actually, I do kind of enjoy to an extent. I was up in Gatlinburg a couple of years ago and they have plenty of flavored moonshines out there. So I got to try some of them. Some of them I really enjoyed, others not so much. But I found that apple pie, which is a very popular flavor for these people making moonshine to make, can be really hit or miss for me. I don't like cinnamon bombs, essentially. I think Fireball is one of the worst liquids ever to be produced by man. It goes all right in apple cider, but Fireball on its own, I don't understand how people can drink it. I don't know. Fireball was sold to me as liquid Red Hots. Any of you ever heard this? Someone told me that, and I thought, that sounds terrible. I don't like Red Hots. Why would I want to drink a Red Hot? On the other hand, I've had apple pie moonshines that have been quite good. I have not even opened this thing yet, so that I could experience it with you, be surprised as to what this tastes like. I have no idea where it falls on the apple pie moonshine spectrum, not even by smell, so we'll find that out together. I don't know if you can tell, but the bottle does have condensation on it because the bottle says drink it cold. I typically drink everything at room temperature neat, at least on this channel. Sometimes I'll play around with things on the rocks or whatever when I'm just trying to explore the spirit. But they recommended that I drink this cold, and I don't know if I'm gonna like it anyway, so I figured let's go ahead and do it. So let's give it a try. I love these little finger rings that these bottles have. They're fun. I think they're fun. Spilt all over the place. It doesn't pour super well. I got almost nothing in it. Let's try that again. There we go. I can smell the apple from here. It's not a whole lot of cinnamon, at least from here, but let's see. A lot of apple, which obviously you would expect to smell apple. I don't smell cinnamon, so I'm actually rather hopeful. But before I go into it, I don't mind a little bit of cinnamon, but if it's, again, a cinnamon bomb, that's not for me. So, cheers. Okay. So, two things. Three things. So, first of all, if you've never had flavored moonshine before, one of the things you just have to know going into it is it's going to be really sweet. It almost has this syrupy quality to it. It's like drinking something that has a lot of simple syrup in it. It's sweet. It's got a little bit more viscous than a normal neat drink. So that's going against it. But I don't think I've ever had a flavored moonshine that doesn't have that. And thinking about it, I'm pretty sure I've had pickle moonshine, like pickle flavored moonshine. I don't think that had that syrupy quality, but I'm not even entirely sure. I think that was just moonshine that had pickles in it, so I'm not entirely sure if that counts. So yeah, the overly, not quite sickly sweet. They did a good job. It's not overdone like a lot of the flavored moonshines can be, and flavored whiskeys or, well, I don't know, flavored vodka. I don't drink vodka. So, and flavored whiskeys can have a lot of sugar in them, which, if you're into that, that's fine. It's not really something I tend to enjoy. So it's there, but it's not overly done. The apple flavor is great. Um, of the apple pie flavored things I've had, this is actually quite good. Um, not entire. It's not the most exciting thing. Starts off with some apple, then it hits you with some cinnamon, and then I thought that was it. But right at the end, there was a little bit more of a complexity to it. You got a little. You actually tasted some of the alcohol. I mean, it's moonshine after all. But you get more of the apple, a little bit of the cinnamon, well, like baking spice. It's not even really cinnamon. It's more of the like pie baking spices. Um, it's quite nice. I am pleasantly surprised. I did not think I was going to like this. I was entirely certain that this was going to be the last of it that I ever drank. And I would give the rest of it to my wife after our child was born, of course. Because my wife tends to like this kind of stuff, but um, it's not going to be my go-to. But I do think it's rather good. I wonder now what it would taste like at room temperature, because cold kind of dampens flavors, and so that might change a little bit. But anyway, my parents are watching. Cheers! It's pretty good. I'm actually enjoying it. I'm certainly enjoying it more than I thought I would. So well done. Now, on to Joshua. Yeah, going back. It's a little sweeter than I think I initially. It's good. I'll leave it. I'll leave it at that. I'll let my own thoughts kind of bubble on it as we go on. So on to Joshua in our Around the Word in a Year series. Joshua's a fun book. A lot of really exciting stuff. We only covered the introduction, the beginning of it. If you've never read Joshua, read some more. There's a lot of really cool and exciting things that happen. I'll be honest, it does get dull, or not dull, it lags at the end when it covers the distribution of land. It's really important from a technical standpoint. And there's good theology in there too, but if you get stuck on it, just skip. But there's a lot of really cool stuff that happens in Joshua, even in our own text for today. And so I only really want to cover a few of the things. I really even skip over a lot of what we talked about. I'm not really going to talk about the last chapter. The last chapter I included, which is the last chapter of the book, of course. It's the conclusion. I include that mostly because I wanted to include what is perhaps the most famous verse out of the book of Joshua, that as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You go into any Christian bookshop or most antique stores and you'll see something that has that Bible verse on it. Often used out of context, but that's not the end of the world. There are interesting implications there that we're not going to go into today about different kinds of covenants that God makes with people and who they all apply to. But we're not going to go into covenant theology today. Not least of which, because that's not really my thing. I haven't read a lot about covenant theology. I know certain sections of Christianity are really into covenant theology, but it's just, I think there's a lot of good stuff there. It's just not what I focused on. So I'm not going to say a whole lot about it. What I want to start out with is, you may have noticed, especially if you're on track reading through this, is that a lot of this looks kind of familiar. A lot of it happens at the beginning of Joshua. Seems like stuff that's already happened to the people of Israel, but just on the Exodus. We talked about the end of manna coming down from heaven as well. We had the crossing of the Jordan, which looks an awful lot like the crossing of the Red Sea. The call of Joshua is different, but it's somewhat similar, has a lot of similarities to the call of Moses. At least, Joshua's already been called before this, but the installation of Joshua, I suppose you could call it. And that's on purpose. That's intentional. God is, in many ways, renewing his covenant. He's letting the people there know that he's still the same God as the one who brought them out of Egypt, brought them across the Red Sea, now brings them across the river Jordan, and will deliver them. And that's why you have so many similarities to the Exodus account and what follows, and the entering into the Promised Land. You can almost think of it as bookends, where the story in essence begins with the Exodus and ends with the movement into the Promised Land. The Ingress. I don't know what you would what you would call it. We have a technical name for it, and if we do, I don't know what it is. So let me know. There is that level of parallelism, and we see it again with Jesus, the life of Christ, focusing more on the Exodus half, where the phrase is that Christ is Israel reduced to one, but where Christ essentially relives a lot of the history of Israel. We see this very clearly in the flight to Egypt and then the return from Egypt, right after the birth of Jesus. And then even parallels to today's reading in his baptism in the Jordan and his wandering in the wilderness. He did it backwards, if you will, but the same elements are there. Of course, most of what we read is about Jericho. And Jericho is one of the stories that everyone knows, but not no one. Everyone knows, but few people have actually read. And we could spend more time than I'm going to in this whole video just on Jericho, but I want to kind of take some of the highlights. First of all, just because I think I can cover it pretty quickly, although it's not sequentially first, is Joshua's encounter with the commander of the army of the Lord. There are questions, of course, whenever someone is unnamed, as to who exactly this is. And we tend to get one of two answers. Either Michael the archangel, or God of some kind. I'm going to just narrow it down to Christ, for reasons that, well, I think anytime God appears in Scripture, unless specifically noted otherwise, it's Jesus. Either in his incarnate or pre-incarnate form. But that's kind of a Christology thing that we don't necessarily need to get too deeply into. For the sake of today, it's either St. Michael the Archangel or Jesus. Now, I'm going to drop something here and then just leave it. And that is that I'm pretty sure that St. Michael from Revelation is also Jesus. But kind of just going to table that there. I think John is speaking allegorically, using St. Michael as the commander of God's army. But I think Jesus is the true referent of St. Michael. But like I said, just going to kind of table that there. The real sense is this is either an angel of some kind, some sort of a militant angel, which we know exists, or it's Jesus, God, the second person of the Trinity in this particular instance. And I think this is a really solid case for theophany, or specifically a Christophany. That is the appearing of God, specifically the appearing of Christ. And the reason I think this is a really solid argument, and it's not dangerous. It's far, far, far less likely that this is an angel, is that Joshua worships him. And every time we see a human worshiping an angel, the angel tells him to quit, right? Stop worshiping me, right? These angels know they don't deserve worship. Who deserves worship is God and God alone. And so because Joshua isn't chided by this commander of the army of the Lord, I think it's pretty obvious that it's God. And then, of course, we have more evidence in that the commander says, take off your shoes, the place where you're standing is holy ground. Of course, hearkening back to the burning bush, both of which, by the way, I think is Christ in its pre-incarnate form. So just wanted to make a note on that. Something I'd like to note is Rahab, and we'll probably conclude talking about Rahab here. Rahab's an interesting character, right? It's one of the women of the Old Testament. One that I think most people know if they don't necessarily know her by name. She is the woman who harbored the spies, the Israelite spies that were coming to spy out the land, and sent them off safely. And she made a deal with them that they wouldn't destroy her or her household as long as they stayed within the confines of their house when the attack occurred, and they kept that scarlet ribbon tied around the window. And I think in both instances, both Rahab rescuing the spies and the spies rescuing Rahab, I think the whole story is just dripping with shadows and types of Christ and his salvation. We have similar elements, especially with the scarlet ribbon, to Passover, right? Whereas in Passover, it was the blood of the lamb, very obvious connections there on the posts and the lintel of the door. Here we see on the window the red scarlet ribbon. And the salvation for her and her household, as long as they did not leave. They stayed within the shelter of the house covered by God and his promises. And I think there's a lot of Christological implications here. Interestingly enough, and you don't know this just from the Joshua text, but in the Gospels, when we get to the genealogies, Rahab is one of 4 women listed as grandmothers of Christ. She's the second chronologically, the first being Tamar, who is a story that I believe we skipped over, but now I'm doubting myself. Tamar was in the line of Christ through Judah. We'll just kind of leave it at that. If we didn't read the story, go back and read it. It's an interesting account, but we're not talking about Judah and Tamar. But Rahab is the second, not an Israelite. She's a Gentile, interestingly enough. So probably was Tamar. She was related to Judah distantly, but still a Gentile, not a descendant of Abraham, certainly. The next in line is Ruth, who was also a Gentile, not a Jew. She marries into a Jewish family, of course. And then her second husband, Boaz, is, of course, of the line of Judah. Ends up being obviously a direct ancestor of David, but only a couple of generations up. I think it's Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David. So just a few generations apart from David. And then there's, of course, Bathsheba, who is the 4th woman listed as a grandmother or mother of Christ, who, I haven't double checked on this, but she was married to Uriah the Hittite. So she was married to a Gentile initially. Again, I haven't checked, but I think she was a Gentile as well. I think there's something there. I'm planning on writing an Advent series about this, so hopefully I'll have more implications as we approach Advent. And then, of course, the final woman listed in the genealogy of Christ is Mary, of course. Mary, who is the second Eve, but we're not talking about that today. But anyway, interesting implications. Rahab, again, one of the ancestors, one of the mothers of Jesus in our text for today. Lots of really interesting things in Joshua. Like I said, go ahead and read it if you haven't already, or if you're interested, go read more. Interestingly enough, we didn't finish the Jericho account. I don't actually know why I stopped it where I did. I don't know why I stopped before the end of the Jericho account, because it's not over. Just as Rahab was saved, no spoiler alert, well, no spoilers, I suppose, one of the Israelites is not. A big problem arises. Go check it out. But this isn't the end of the Jericho account. Again, I'm not entirely sure why I cut it off where I did and didn't just finish the whole narrative. It's one of those sections that we almost never talk about. So go check it out. It might be a story you've never heard before. And we'll just leave it at that. And so, all you who wait on the Lord, let us raise a glass and drink to Christ in